His crime should have ended Bob Gidding's military career, but instead the Army gave him a gun and sent him to Kuwait. This is really upsetting for you to hear.
This is a big deal. You can't do that.
The Army is desperate for soldiers to fight in Iraq. Recruiting is down 25%, and reservists, so-called weekend warriors, make up nearly half of those doing the fighting. And now the case of a Bay Area soldier raises yet another question. Is the military in such bad shape that it will send felons to the front lines?
I was scared the whole time I was with him,
That's the way Rose Gidding describes her time with Army reservist Bob Gidding.
I was so depressed, when I was with him. I don't want anybody to have to go through something like that,
They met when she was only a teenager.
He was fun, he was loud, when you're 15, you like those kind of people.
But soon there were problems. She says he used drugs and was controlling.
I had to be with him 24 hours of the day. I couldn't use the restroom by myself. I couldn't shower alone. I couldn't do anything.
Worse, she says, he'd begun to threaten her, even their baby, if she tried to leave him. Why did you put up with that?
I was scared. I was scared of him. I still am.
And she couldn't understand why the reserves wanted him.
I would tell him I don't think he's, fit for the military.
Especially after one night in March of 2002, when in a jealous rage,
he just grabbed me and put me in his car.
Gidding drove to a friend's house in Morgan Hill. One more man Rose says he accused her of sleeping with.
I didn't know what he was going to do.
Police reports say Gidding walked up to the man's truck with a can of gasoline.
He poured it all over his car, all over.
Then set it on fire.
I was just in kind of like shock, what just happened.
Confronted by police that night, he confessed and later pled no contest to the arson, a felony. And that crime should have ended Bob Gidding's military career because the rule in the reserves is felons aren't allowed to serve. But it didn't, because even though Gidding was sentenced to 5 months in jail and 3 years probation, he didn't go to jail. Instead, he shipped out with his unit for active duty. His first stop, training in Fort Bliss, Texas.
Okay, we're recording.
Where he made this videotape he sent to Rose. Then it was on to Kuwait, where he didn't even bother to hide his felony status. According to 2 other soldiers, at a meeting of his unit, he told the entire group and a commanding officer about his conviction.
He should have been sent home.
Immediately.
Immediately.
He's General Paul Monroe, until recently the head of the California National Guard, in charge of many reserve soldiers. So is that somebody who you're going to want serving in the military?
No, because they're unpredictable. You just don't know how they're going to react under times of stress.
But Gidding was left to serve, and when he came home a year later on leave from Kuwait, Rose says there were more threats and a fight.
He broke our coffee table and he slammed it into the wall. I told his commanding officer.
What she got back was this letter from the captain, saying he was not in a position to take action.
They didn't do anything.
In fact, back in Kuwait, not only did Gidding stay on active duty, he was given the job of military policeman, a felon now charged with upholding the law and protecting his fellow soldiers.
Oh, no. That's the worst thing they can assign him to, because he's armed and he's given indiscriminate use of his weapon.
And in Gidding's case, it was an even worse idea. Why? Because as part of his probation, the judge in Santa Clara County had outlined a very specific requirement. Gidding was not allowed to have a gun. This is really upsetting for you to hear.
This is a big deal. This is you can't do that. You can't do that. He's going to cause somebody to be killed.
So why would the reserves keep a felon in their ranks? We went to ask the reserve's top man for the Western U.S., General Robert Ostenberg.
We didn't know at that time about the events that took place that got him into trouble with the felony.
So what about that meeting where Gidding confessed his crime to his fellow soldiers? He reported his felony conviction there to the platoon.
Where was that located?
In Kuwait.
In Kuwait? Mm-hmm. What should have taken place there? Company commander should have filed a request for separation.
He should have been out of there.
Should have been out of there. This is a serious issue, a serious crime. A felony is a felony.
So how many convicted felons like Bob Gidding are there in the reserves? It turns out the Army doesn't know. Because as we found out, there are no routine background checks for thousands of currently enlisted personnel. Even though experts like longtime Pentagon consultant Eli Flyer say it wouldn't be difficult to do those checks.
From a technological standpoint, easy.
In fact, Flyer's own research shows there are felons going undetected who could be weeded out with those simple background checks.
It almost seems mindless not to make, some of the changes that are so evident.
But he says in times of personnel shortages, commanders are resistant.
If you get rid of an individual, you're going to have to find a replacement.
So he says the attitude of those commanders often is,
I just can't afford to lose any more.
the question that comes to mind is whether they may have a lot more felons than we know about.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
Like in the case of Gidding. Do you think that the pressure may have made somebody in the Army
Absolutely.
look past his conviction?
Absolutely it would. They need people right now.
Everybody that they can get.
Everybody they can get right now.
Would we openly and willingly want to keep a felon on? No. Giddings is not so important that he cannot be replaced.
But tell that to his current commander, because even though Gidding was quickly arrested on new drug and theft charges since coming home late last year, and he's now serving a year in jail for the arson, that commander still wants to keep him. In this memo obtained by CBS 5 Investigates, Gidding's captain wrote to the judge, asking for Gidding to once again be allowed out of jail on the weekends so he can rejoin his fellow soldiers in the Army Reserves. And General Ostenberg's reaction?
We can't afford mistakes like this.
You're putting your own unit at risk. You can't afford that risk. You absolutely cannot afford that risk.
We made repeated attempts to speak with Gidding through his lawyer, but they declined to do an interview. The Army Reserves has now opened a formal investigation into the case and the actions of Gidding's commanders. And as to Gidding, General Ostenberg says they've now finally begun the process to discharge him from the military.